So, welcome to quarantine day 2 in Washington State. It's my husband's birthday today, actually, so I'm doing something a little special and making an Indian meal for him, and I'm starting by making the dessert, which is the title of this video, Gulab Jamun. So the cool thing about this dessert is it uses pretty much everything that you can keep in your pantry. With like the exception of butter. That's pretty much the only thing in here that you have to keep like refrigerated. But butter can last in your freezer forever and in your refrigerator forever. So this is all very shelf-stable products. So you use sugar, canned milk, a little tiny bit of flour, butter, ground cardamom, and whole cardamom pods. So you can use whatever spice you like. We love cardamom, and cardamom is traditional for this dish, but you could use cinnamon, you could use cloves, you could use nutmeg, you could use any combination of various other spices that you like. And almond meal, ground almonds basically, almond flour. This is rose water. If you're not familiar with this product, get familiar with it. It's pretty cool, and it's quintessential in Middle Eastern cooking and some Indian cooking. Baking powder, and then the star of this show and our little cheat, basically, we're cheating when we're making this dish. It's not quite the traditional way. This is powdered milk. So this is a really good thing to have in your pantry in case you're snowed in or quarantined, or for whatever reason if you can't get to the store to get fresh milk. This is not really good if you reconstitute it with water and just drink it, but if you use it in baking and in cooking like we're going to do, it's a really good substitute for milk. And as you'll see with the techniques for this dish, you need powdered milk because it saves you a lot of time. So here is everything prepped. I'm making a half recipe, by the way, and the whole recipe is written up in the video description below. The whole recipe makes 20 balls. I'm only making 10. So anyway, I have in here about a quarter teaspoon of cardamom powder, quarter teaspoon of baking powder, generous quarter teaspoon. When you're reducing recipes, it's generally a good idea to use a little more baking powder, just so that it works. 1.5 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, a half a cup of powdered milk underneath all of this, and 1 tablespoon of the almond meal. And then in here I have 2 tablespoons of the canned milk plus 2 tablespoons of water. So what I basically done is made fresh milk. You can totally use fresh milk. I just happen to not have any fresh milk, and that's not a pantry staple item anyway. It's not shelf stable necessarily, so canned milk and water works fine. And so it's a quarter cup of milk total and 1 tablespoon of butter. And I'm going to microwave this until it is warm and the butter is melted. And all you have to do to the dry ingredients is just stir until they're combined. So my dry ingredients are all combined and the butter is melted in the warm milk mixture. So all that remains is to combine. So I mentioned earlier that the powdered dried milk was kind of cheating, and it's kind of a hack. Traditionally, this dish is made by boiling milk down until it's like pasty, almost completely dry, and that takes several hours. So if you want to make this the traditional way, that's how you do it. But using powdered milk is a nice shortcut. This dish can come together in less than an hour if you use powdered milk, as I am. So after you've combined everything, it's going to look like this very thick, like pasty dough sort of situation. And this isn't like a cookie dough, right? It's a little more like a cake batter, and you might look at it and think to yourself, how am I going to roll that into balls to deep fry? That's more like fritter batter. But if you wait 20 minutes, come back later, I promise you it will be more solidified like a cookie dough. So while our dough is doughifying, I am making the syrup that we will later soak these donuts in. What I have here is a simple syrup. It's just half a cup of sugar and a half a cup of water. And I have it over medium-low heat, and I'm just going to stir it occasionally till the sugar dissolves. To it, I am also going to add a bunch of green cardamom pods. If you've never had cardamom before, it has this very complex, difficult to describe flavor. I mean, it's sort of like allspice in that it tastes like a bunch of different spices at once, but cardamom, I think it has a very dominant black pepper sort of flavor to it, which it doesn't sound like that would be good with desserts, but it is really good with desserts. And we have just a half of a teaspoon of rose water. Rose water is so potent, you do not want to put too much in there, otherwise it'll taste like potpourri or soap. So it's taken a few minutes on medium-low heat, but my syrup has come to a gentle simmer. So you want to simmer it for at least 1 minute, not much longer than that. You don't want to do you know, candy kinds of reactions with this. You want it to stay a syrup. So just 1 more minute of this and it will be done. And incidentally, I'm making this syrup like a couple hours in advance of when I plan on using it. I like making it in advance and then letting it cool naturally to room temperature and then heating it up later to use it again because it helps the cardamom pods really infuse all their flavor into the syrup. And it just gets a lot of the work out of the way so that when it comes time to make the dish later, I'm not all stressed out. 20 minutes later, after being covered, remember that soupy batter we had before? Now look at it. Unbelievable, right? It's like a cookie dough. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a little bit of dough. This should make 10 balls total, and you're just going to roll it into balls. And these were a little bit sticky, but I rolled them into balls. If you wet your fingers while you're rolling them, they won't stick to your fingers as much. Pro tip. And meanwhile, I am heating some oil. You don't actually need, like, these don't need to be deep fried. This is a pretty shallow amount of oil, and this is left over from when I made mozzarella cheese sticks a couple days ago. So that's why there's some little bits of, like, breadcrumbs in there. But that's totally fine. The oil is still pretty good. It's not all dirty with, you know, crap. I usually reuse my deep fry oil a couple times just to get extra uses out of it. Anyway, I'm heating this to medium, and then I'm going to lower it to low. Usually when you deep fry things, you want the oil to be hotter, but for these, because they're so dense, if you have the oil too hot, the outsides are going to burn before the insides can cook. So you want the oil to be relatively low heat, like 300 degrees or less. The oil is about 300 degrees. You can see it's starting to shimmer and move a little bit on itself. So I'm going to start putting in the balls. So as you can maybe see, when they're starting, they are completely on the bottom of the oil. They're completely submerged. And that's what you want. As I said earlier, these balls are very dense compared to like other kinds of donuts or bready things that you would deep fry, which is why you want the oil at a nice low temperature. And one of your clues to when your Gulab Jamun are finished is going to be when they all float nicely. So I am the queen of misspeaking. They sink only for the first few seconds or so, and you want to make sure that you don't let them stick to the bottom of the pan while they're sinking, otherwise you're going to get little brown spots on them. That's okay, they're still edible. So they will start floating, and I don't know how well you can see this, but these balls have really expanded from the baking powder in them. And yeah, you just want to keep gently frying them and try tossing them around in the oil a little bit as you go. This will ensure that they keep as round as possible while they cook. But it's okay if they're not like perfectly round. That'll just show people that this was homemade. Hey, at this point I'd like to thank Honey Badger, one of my newest patrons. Thank you for supporting this channel and always watching the videos. So this should take a few minutes. You might think, oh, they look kind of done already. They're floating, they're puffed up, they're brown. But no, they need about 5 minutes in this oil before they will be done. And by the way, I'm not the supreme authority on how to make these. No one taught me how to do it. I just looked at a recipe and tried it out, and it worked. Beginner's luck, I guess, and I made it a few times since. Cooking really is all about experimentation. But if you feel like they're coloring too quickly, because again, you need at least 5 minutes of these in the oil before they will be done. And you probably want about 7 minutes total. So if you feel like they're turning color too fast and that they're bubbling away too quickly, stir them a lot, because agitating them and taking them out of the oil a little bit here and there will keep them from cooking too quickly. And or turn your heat down. And if it's your very first time making these and you're not sure if one of them is done yet, just simply take one out and cut it in half and see if it's still doughy on the inside. So once they have cooked for about 7 minutes and they're nice and big and puffy and brown all over, simply remove them onto paper towels. And this step you can do even days in advance. I sometimes, because we can't always eat all of these in one go, I'll make a batch and then I'll freeze some of them. They actually freeze just fine before you put them in the syrup. And then defrost them and reheat them in syrup, and they're good as new. We'll let them rest until we're ready to use them. Aren't they pretty? And we are back. 5 minutes before you want to eat your gulab jamun, reheat your syrup until it is warm. It's nice and steamy. And we're going to be eating now just 5 of them. So I'm only going to put 5 in the syrup, and I'm going to leave the rest not in the syrup, so that they may be eaten later. If I put them all in the syrup now, they would get soggy whenever we wanted to eat them later, so this works better. So before we put these balls in the syrup, they have no sugar in them at all. They would be actually not that tasty if you just ate them without putting them in the syrup. And you want to roll them around in the syrup for the first minute or so. You want these to have a good 5 minutes in the syrup to really have a chance to soak it up. I'm having 2 and Joshua is having 3. Oh, they already look so good. And after they've heated through in the syrup for a minute or so, and you've really gotten them coated all around, you can start pressing them gently. And what this does is they're puffed up at the moment and aerated from the baking powder. And I don't know how well you can see that, but when I press down towards the bottom, little bubbles come out. And then when I release, syrup is soaking into these donuts. So it's don't smash them too hard or you will smash them. Just be very gentle. And you'll notice at first you're going to meet with a lot of resistance, but by the end, oh, see those bubbles? It's basically allowing the syrup to go into it. But anyway, by the end of the 5 minutes, they will be a lot softer, and they will have soaked up a lot of this syrupy goodness. And after your 5 minutes are up, incidentally, that is the perfect amount of time to brew a nice cup of chai to go with this. I find 2 to 3 of these is a good serving per person. And it's also nice to get some of the syrup. Oh, I'm getting like all the cardamom pods in there. And you also want to pour some of the syrup over them. And behold, it's milky, cardamomy goodness.